Welcome to RegTech Real Talk, where we dive into the wild stories behind financial crime. I'm Jamahal.
And I'm Charlie. Today we're talking about a heist so sophisticated it makes Ocean's 11 look like amateur hour. Jamahal, when you told me we were covering something called Fishrot, I thought it was about actual rotting fish. Turns out it's about something that stinks even worse.
Oh, it stinks. We're talking about Iceland's biggest fishing company systematically looting one of Africa's poorest nations, $650 million, vanishing through shell companies across 27 countries. That's 5% of Namibia's entire GDP, Charlie. Enough to build 1,300 schools. But hey, why educate children when you can buy yachts, right?
5% of the GDP? You're telling me they stole more than most countries spend on defense? When did this happen?
That's the thing. This isn't some dusty historical crime. The looting ran for 7 years from 2012 until it was exposed by WikiLeaks in November 2019. But Charlie, this story is still live. 6 years later, not a single conviction. The trial keeps getting postponed. The Icelandic executives who orchestrated this? They're sipping coffee in Reykjavik while their Namibian accomplices sit in custody and victims wait for justice that feels increasingly fictional. It's like watching a heist movie stuck on pause, except the criminals already got away with the money.
Okay, you've got my attention. Let's get into this. How does someone steal an ocean?
It starts with PowerPoints and promises. So 2012, Samherji, this Icelandic fishing giant worth $700 million, shows up in Namibia talking about partnerships and development. They need access to mackerel quotas, which in a country where a third of the population lives in poverty, are basically protein gold.
But surely there are laws protecting these resources.
Absolutely. Namibian law says foreign companies can only be junior partners. So what does Samherji do? They create an entire parallel universe of companies. On paper, these are Namibian businesses. In reality, every string leads back to Reykjavik.
Classic shell game.
But Charlie, the financial architecture they built, it's genuinely breathtaking in its cynicism. Let me walk you through just one payment. Money leaves a Namibian company as payment for fish. It flies to Cyprus, but here's the twist. It actually lands in a Norwegian bank account at DNB, Norway's biggest bank.
Why Norway?
Because Norway has this squeaky clean reputation. No one's going to question a Norwegian bank. It's like hiding your stolen goods at a priest's house. From there, the money splits like a virus. Some goes to Mauritius for management fees to a company with 0 employees. Some bounces to Dubai as consulting payments to a firm that exists only to catch bribes. Then, and this is chef's kiss audacious, it circles back to Namibian officials through yet another set of shells.
That's dizzying. But someone had to set all this up, right?
Enter the architects. On the Icelandic side, you've got executives like Ingvar Juliusson and Egil Helgi Arnason, men who knew exactly how to do this. These weren't naive businessmen stumbling into corruption. Samherji constructed a machine designed to extract wealth from one of Africa's poorest nations.
And on the Namibian side?
A cast of characters that would be comedic if it wasn't so tragic. One was Bernhard Esau, the fisheries minister, who looked at his nation's resources and saw a personal ATM. But here's my favorite, Saki Shanghala, the justice minister. The man supposed to uphold the law was actively breaking it.
The justice minister was taking bribes?
Oh, he was taking bribes, laundering money, the whole buffet. Then you've got James Hatuikulipi, who simultaneously chaired the state fishing company and the private companies receiving its quotas. His cousin Tamsin Fiddy was the minister's son-in-law. They turned national resources into a family business.
So how did they disguise all this money?
This is where it gets almost insulting in its banality. Millions moved as technical consulting from consultants who never consulted. Management services from companies that managed nothing except bank accounts. Marketing fees to entities that couldn't market water in a desert. One Dubai shell company, Tundavala Investments, existed solely to receive these payments. Its owner? The same James Hatuikulipi who was approving the payments. He was literally paying himself to consult for himself.
So who blew the whistle?
Johannes Stefansson. And this is where our story gets properly dark. He was Samherji's own man in Namibia, the architect of many of these structures. But by 2016, watching fishing communities get destroyed while executives bought holiday homes, his conscience finally broke.
He just came forward?
Not quite. First, he tried to quit quietly. But December 2016, days after resigning, he's in a South African hotel when his body starts convulsing. Organs failing, vision blurring, the doctors eventually conclude he was poisoned. This wasn't a warning, Charlie. This was attempted murder.
They tried to kill their colleague.
Multiple times. His lungs are permanently damaged. He now needs oxygen to visit Namibia. But instead of silencing him, they created a man with nothing left to lose. He'd already collected 30,000 documents, every email, contract, and spreadsheet documenting the entire operation.
So what happens when it all comes out?
In November 2019, WikiLeaks drops the Fishrot files. The leak hit like a tsunami. Within 24 hours, ministers were forced into resigning. By election day, because the universe has a sense of timing, they're in handcuffs. People are literally dancing in the streets of Windhoek. The ruling party loses its parliamentary supermajority for the first time since independence.
So justice was swift?
Justice sprinted, then tripped, and hasn't gotten up since. That was 6 years ago. And yet the main trial still hasn't started.
With all this evidence, how is that even possible?
Welcome to the next masterclass in legal obstruction. Every time they try to start the trial, something happens. The former justice minister, remember, he's one of the accused, challenges whether the judge is even legally a judge. Another defendant claims poverty despite owning 27 properties. Apparently, his calculator doesn't count real estate. When asked when he'll be ready for trial, he says January 2026, 7 years after arrest.
That's insane.
My personal favorite, they can't proceed because the courtroom lacks Wi-Fi. In 2024, the absence of internet becomes grounds to delay one of Africa's most important corruption trials. Meanwhile, 3 key Samherji executives, the Icelandic architects of this whole scheme, fled home to Iceland, which conveniently has no extradition treaty with Namibia.
So they're just free?
Completely free, living their best lives in Reykjavik while their Namibian accomplices are in custody. It's textbook European extraction. Pillage the resources, then hide behind borders and bureaucracy when the bill comes due.
So what are the compliance lessons here?
Every red flag you can imagine was waving like a hurricane warning. Circular money trails where funds do complete loops through multiple countries before landing back where they started. Companies in Mauritius generating millions in fees with 0 employees, 0 offices, 0 actual business. The chairman of the state fishing company literally owns the shell company receiving the bribes.
And nobody caught this?
That's the thing, people did catch it. Bank of New York Mellon flagged transactions as potential money laundering. But each institution only saw their piece. Each country only watched their borders. The criminals understood something fundamental. Make your crime complex enough, spread it across enough jurisdictions, and the system can't keep up.
So what happened to the banks that enabled this?
Here's where it gets properly infuriating. Norway's DNB Bank, they were the ones who processed all these suspicious transactions through the Cyprus companies. They got fined $45 million. For a bank that makes billions, that's not a punishment. It's a business expense. Even after those red flags from Bank of New York Mellon, DNB kept processing. No executives got convictions, no licenses were revoked.
And Samherji itself?
Still operating globally. Their fish is in supermarkets across Europe right now. They conducted an internal investigation that, shocking nobody, found no corporate wrongdoing. The company that orchestrated the systematic looting of one of Africa's poorest nations faces fewer consequences than a teenager caught shoplifting. Their brand hasn't even suffered. Most European consumers have no idea.
This kind of sends the message that crime pays if you're big enough?
The risk-reward calculation in financial crime is completely broken. Get caught facilitating the looting of an entire nation? Pay a fine, that's a fraction of annual profits, and keep trading. It does suggest that enabling fraud is profitable as long as you can afford the fines.
That's infuriating. So while they're calculating fines as a business expense, communities are destroyed. I want to know how we can stop the next Fishrot without having to wait around for a whistleblower.
That's why platforms like Anka exist. The smaller fish need tools that can flag unusual transaction patterns, scrutinize money flowing in from opaque tax havens, and catch these disguised payments. Because while corporate lawyers delay and multinationals calculate fines as operating costs, real people suffer. Those fishing communities are still destroyed. Those schools still aren't built. That stolen wealth is buying penthouses in Dubai while families in Namibia go hungry.
Will there ever be justice in the Fishrot case?
They've set another trial date, August 2025. Will it happen? 6 years of delays does make you feel doubtful. Every postponement doesn't just delay justice. It teaches a masterclass in impunity. The message to would-be criminals is crystal clear. Make your theft complex enough, hire lawyers who can turn procedure into poetry, and time becomes your accomplice.
And what about Stefansson? How's he faring?
He's still preparing to testify, holding on to those 30,000 documents like they're holy scripture. There's something both heroic and heartbreaking about maintaining that faith in a system that's failing in real time.
This is genuinely sad.
But here's the thing. The playbook is now public. We know how they move money through Cyprus shells. We know how they disguise bribes as consulting fees. We know how they exploit jurisdiction gaps. Every compliance team can now recognize these patterns. The question is whether we're building systems fast enough to catch the next fish rot before it destroys another community.
So the lesson is that $650 million in evidence might not guarantee justice, as long as criminals understand the system better than the system understands the crime.
But also that one person with a conscience and a hard drive can expose an empire built on theft. The gap between what we can prove and what we can prosecute is widening, but that makes compliance tools more critical than ever.
Heavy stuff. Thanks for joining us on RegTech Real Talk.
Remember, every invoice from a tax haven tells a story. Every shell company has a purpose. Every circular money trail leads somewhere. For compliance teams in emerging markets, catching these patterns isn't just about regulatory boxes. It's about protecting your community's future from those who would steal it.
Nice one. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Jamahal. Stay compliant out there because nobody wants their name in a WikiLeaks drop.